Good evening, everyone. Yes, I am a member of the Restructuring Task Group. Very, very plain name. We have a lot of very simple descriptive names at the moment. So, as you may know, at the last Synod Presbytery meeting, the last main one in November, there was a decision made to start to separate the business and the existence of presbytery from synod, and then also to form a non-geographic presbytery. That would have a particular ethic, but everyone would be free to welcome. But of course, if we're forming one presbytery that some people will be part of, we're necessarily forming at least one more presbytery that everyone else will be part of. Part of the role of the Restructuring Task Group is to work out how many presbyteries will we have? What will be the responsibilities of that presbytery? Yes, they are given in the regulations, but how will it work best for us? So it's over 10 years, I think it's 13, 14 years ago since we ceased having 7 presbyteries in South Australia. So up until then, from the beginning of the Uniting Church, there had been 7 presbyteries in South Australia. Presbyteries have some very important and distinctive critical roles within the church. They're one of the 4 councils of the church, you may know: congregation, presbytery, synod and assembly. Presbytery has particular roles for the pastoral care of congregations and ministers within their bounds, and for supporting those congregations in their mission. They are also the body of the church that inducts ministers, that ordains ministers, and looks after the business of making sure that every congregation, every placement is filled. So that's the role of the presbytery. Some of that is in partnership with the synod, and of course always in partnership with the congregations. Now, as it is some time since we had separate presbyteries, more than one presbytery, there are now some people within our church who have had no experience of being in a presbytery other than the one synod presbytery that we've been part of. So as we start to looking at what will this new thing be like, they can be at a bit of a disadvantage because they've never experienced it. And then there's others of us who can look back, and we do remember being part of a presbytery, a separate presbytery. And then we can be at a bit of a disadvantage because we can assume that we're just going to pick up where we left off, and I think it's going to be something different, the same but different, as I've heard people say. So, and one of the reasons for that is because we now live in quite a different regulatory environment than we did 40 years ago when the Uniting Church was formed, and even 13, 14 years ago when we moved from 7 presbyteries to 1 and mission networks. So there are some things that are better handled by the synod overall rather than each presbytery trying to deal with it because of the body of regulations, of expectations that are now part of running organisations like the church. So as we are looking at forming new presbyteries, as we're looking at what that means, one of the key things we're looking at is what responsibilities will the presbyteries have and exercise, and what responsibilities will it be better for those presbyteries to leave in the hands of the synod, so to pass on back to the synod. So, for example, presbyteries in the regulations do have roles around property, and previously in the 7 presbyteries, originally they all had property committees. But even by the end of their life, some of them were choosing to hand over all their responsibility to do with property to the synod. matters of discipline are another area where the synod and safe church, which, as you know, is very different now than it was 13 years ago, and certainly very different than it was 40 years ago. Some of those matters to remain with the synod rather than being delegated to the presbyteries. So, the restructuring task group has met 3 times. They'll meet for the 4th time tomorrow. And some of the questions that they are looking at. It's very hard sometimes to work out. It's a bit of a chicken and egg thing. How many presbyteries will we have? How many congregations will want to be part of a non-geographic presbytery? How many congregations would prefer not to be? And until we know that, it's a bit hard to know how many presbyteries. And until we know that, it's a bit hard to know what the presbyteries might look like. But for some congregations, until we know what those presbyteries might look like, we don't know which one we want to belong to. So it's a bit around about. But we are looking at. We're also working with the other group that was set up, which is the group that's setting up the non-geographic presbytery, because what we don't want is a situation where one set of rules and expectations apply to one presbytery and a different one to another presbytery. Presbyteries can choose, once they're formed, to do something, but as they are formed, they need to have the same responsibilities and understandings and expectations. So the restructuring task group is working closely with the missional non-geographic presbytery task group to try and cooperate, to work together and to have a good understanding of what each other is doing. One of the questions that's particularly pertinent to us as a mission network is, what's the place of mission networks in the new structure? I noticed Rebecca in the newsletter, which I read, Rebecca, made an assumption, stated that her assumption was that there would be no ongoing role for mission networks. And that certainly mission networks as they are now cannot continue, because a lot of the roles that they undertake, the responsibilities that they carry, will be handed over to the presbyteries. But many congregations have really enjoyed and benefited from and value their connection with their mission network. So the question might be, what is it that we value about our network that we would want to see continue, and how can we best do that? And certainly as we're looking at setting up the presbyteries and how that's going to happen, the question is, it's not about going back to what we had, it's about moving forward into something new that will enable us to support the work of the congregations, the mission of the church, in the best way possible. So I've been given a few questions to actually ask of you but before I do that, are there some burning questions on your heart at the moment that you would like to ask me about the work of the restructuring task group?
I think my question comes from a concern, and it just would be good to hear a voice to it. I guess I'm quite worried that a bit of an us and them thing might happen.
Between the non-geographic
and then geographic,
yep.
Or, do we have 2 non-geographics and 3... Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
I guess, can you tell me something of the thought process that's going so that doesn't actually happen in the church? Yes.
That is something that right from the start we said we don't want an us and them. So initially we may only have 2 presbyteries because we're committed to setting up the non-geographic presbytery by the 1st of July, but we mightn't have enough time to work out all the other ins and outs of other presbyteries to start with. So we might just initially have 2 non-geographic presbyteries, the missional non-geographic presbytery and everyone else. That is not the end point. That is a place along the way as we give ourselves time to do this well. There's a lot of thought that we need at least 3 presbyteries to help avoid that us and them. So my sense is that we're going to end up with at least 3 presbyteries. Probably not too many more than that, or we will end back into the problems that we had that sort of pushed us into moving to 1 presbytery. There's been a bit of an assumption that the other presbyteries would be geographic, but that's not actually necessarily so. It's a case for us to, as we're listening to people, to work out what it is that people want and to work out how we best put that in place. So, for example, would the Community Outreach Mission Network want to become a presbytery? That would mean taking on a lot of extra responsibility in that. Is it big enough? It probably is big enough. So the question is, will the other presbyteries be geographic or non-geographic? I suspect they'll be geographic, Ruth Mary, but we don't know yet until we continue our consultation to find out. Certainly, as I said, we want to set the presbyteries up on an equitable basis so that the expectations of all the presbyteries are the same. There's not a special presbytery or the other. We were referring to the presbytery and the other presbytery. We've got to think of some better language than that as we move to talk about it. But that is something that's on our mind, that we need to move forward into something that's about setting up presbyteries for the benefit of the congregations and the mission of the church. Yeah.
You just mentioned language. One of my difficulties with the proposal which we accepted was that it's called a missional non-geographic. That suggests that no one else is going to be involved in mission, and I would hope that that name gets changed.
Yeah. Alan, I think you can look at it 2 ways. One is everyone else just assumes they're missional, so they don't need to use the name. You can think of it that way. But yes, I think it was part of, as that group was thinking about what they were doing, it was an important aspect of what they wanted in their focus, and I don't think it was intended as a slight on anyone else. It was just part of their thinking about what was important for them at that stage. But a lot of the work just talks about the non-geographic presbytery.
Hi, Diane. 2 questions. First one is, how will this be paid for?
Yes.
And will there be positions in each of the presbyteries that have to be paid for?
Yep.
The second question is around call.
Mm-hmm.
So will call simply become about theology, or will it become based on suitability, or all those things? So they're my 2 questions.
Yep. So the question of funding is very much up in the air at the moment, and that's partly, once again, until we know how many presbyteries there are, the question of how much money is available is something that can't really be answered. Although I think at our meeting tomorrow, Peter Battersby is going to be coming with some drafts of possible funding models. There are a couple of things that are being kept in mind. One, we don't want the burden on congregations to be any greater in terms of mission and service fund. And so at the moment, congregations can be paying up to 9%, 10% to mission and service fund. That's right, it went up, and up to 3% to their network. Some networks don't charge anything, some do charge the 3%, but the intent is that that the burden on congregations will be no more than 12%, which is 13%. Yes, it was 12%, it went up. So that won't increase anymore. And the other thing is we're committed to a balanced budget. So we've got to, whatever model we put up in terms of people who are employed within the presbytery or within the synod, we've got to stay within the budget that we have. What that will look like, we don't know, and I'm sure people like Ian and even me, because I still have a continuing role in pastoral relations and mission planning, be very keen to know what our future looks like in terms of ongoing. So there's certainly an understanding that some of the work that is being supported within the Synod Presbytery Office will need to go out to presbyteries. What that will look like and how that will look like, we don't know yet. But as I said, don't want to put any more burden on congregations in terms of paying mission and service fund, need to stay within a balanced budget. So that was the first question. Second question was about call and theology. You know, Mark, I'm not sure that it's not a bit of both already. So if we sit in PRC, we know that for some of the mission networks, the first question is not about call, although I'm not saying it's not an important thing, but it is. How will the theology match with the congregation? And they understand about the theology of their congregation. Is it going to be... is the non-geographic presbytery going to be a separate entity that once you're in there, you stay in there and you can't, you only move between congregations? That's not the expectation of the people setting it up. They expect there would be movement in and out of that presbytery, certainly by ministers and quite possibly by congregations too. So congregations can choose to be in that presbytery, but they can also decide to move out of it. Presbyteries can also decide, after a while, they might like to be part of that non-geographic presbytery, and they can apply to the synod to transfer. I hope that within the pastoral relation committees of the various presbyteries, that call will continue to be the important aspect, the listening for the call on people and the call on congregations to mission, and to match those up as well as they can in their method of discernment. Ken, you had a question you were asking me before. You actually had a list of them.
I'm a bit old-fashioned. I came from the Presbyterian background, and back in the old days we had geographical presbyteries. There was the Presbytery of Torrens and the Presbytery of Onkaparinga. So South Australia was sort of divided into two, which helped people with travelling. Has the SA Synod already decided that there will be a non-graphical and a graphical, or do we move on from... Yeah. Where do we move? I've got an open mind on this, but I don't...
Yeah. As I said, part of it will be a result of listening to the various congregations around the place. There seems to be a lot of sympathy, a lot of... can't think of the right word... alignment with having geographic presbyteries. Some of the mission networks that were formed actually were formed to try and retain that sense of geographic closeness. So we had the Gulf Network and the Northern Network in what used to be Wakefield, and the Western Mission Network in what was Ayr Presbytery, to try and initially also the Southeastern Mission Network. They were congregations who felt that being close was more important, close geographic was more important in supporting each other than being close theologically. So it's a question of working out what congregations are looking for and what will suit them best. Okay. So, what do you think is the distinctive element of this mission network? And what is its objective? Do you want to turn around to 2 or 3 people around you? And I'll give you a couple of minutes to work out. What do you think are the distinctive elements of this mission network? What are its objectives? So, anyone got anything to offer? What have you been talking about?
Okay, well, we're talking about how with the COMN network we help, encourage and support each other. So with ideas, different ways of being able to outreach, with the grants, helping to support congregations that way, and in reporting back about the grants, we're hearing different ideas of how different congregations have outreached, which plants a seed in our minds thinking, well, we could do something similar or the same. So we're there helping and supporting each other, encouraging each other. It's not just solely about us, our church and me and how can my church grow. It's how can we help and support everyone else. So that's a key thing, Gladys.
And as we've talked about geographic and non-geographic, we're way off the edge in Barmera, and one of the joys for us of the Community Outreach Mission Network is seeing that there are other churches doing stuff, and we're not alone, and some of the ideas don't translate, but some of them do, and I feel really nurtured by the group, and you know the utmost energy that's gone into keeping us in the loop in different ways. And so I think there's value in smallness. We're not that small, but people who get together wanting to be involved in the community in whatever way we can, and sharing ideas and supporting each other, and I just love it. So
one of the things that is different about us is that we're a bottom-up network. We are supposed to be run by the congregations. We're not supposed to be run by the executive. The executive's there to organise things, but it was always from the beginning designed for the congregations to determine the network itself. So that's a bit distinctive. The other thing, of course, is that the ethos is that God's active in the world and our job is to connect with what God's doing.
Thank you.
And I like the fact that we're all one community together.
So building a sense of unity and oneness.
And we mentioned about the diversity of theology in the same room. It's nice to bump up against each other and learn and grow together, regardless.
I think the freedom to think and believe what you like without fear of discrimination or being bullied or whatever is really important.
Just a minute, my writing is not... Will I have it by tomorrow? No. So, one more, sorry.
Oh, I just wanted to say, as a rep, I've gone away from every meeting I've attended feeling encouraged, and the worship time has always been a highlight, and I've tried to pass that on to the congregation and tried to get different ones to come, because being a presbytery rep in the Adelaide Northwest way back, they virtually were just business meetings, not always pleasant meetings, and you never went away feeling all that encouraged. But it's very different when there's no business to discuss, and we concentrate on the work of God, and that's what's been so very good about the network.
Mm-hmm. So just keeping that in mind, the question, do you believe that a multi-presbytery structure can pick up the distinctive element of this mission network? And if not, what do you think are the barriers to that happening? If yes, what might be some hopes that you have? Another couple of minutes to talk with each other. Do you believe a multi-presbytery structure can pick up, so more than one presbytery, will that structure pick up the distinctive elements of your mission network, role and objectives?
Sorry, Guy, could you just read out what presbyteries are actually meant to do? You listed what presbyteries were meant to do in your first speech.
Right.
Can you just go through them again?
Yeah, now, as I was leaving, I thought I should take my regulations with me so I can answer a question like that more fully, but I don't know where they are. And I do have them on my phone, but it'll take me a little while to get them up. But the main thing is caring for and encouraging the congregations and ministers within the bounds of the presbytery, attending to matters of placement, along with the synod in the placements committee, inducting, commissioning and ordaining ministers, helping with the selection of candidates, they're probably some of the main things. Presbyteries have a pastoral relations committee which will deal with some aspects of discipline or some matters of complaint. That's also shared with the synod. Presbyteries have had some responsibilities with property, but that will probably not be much at all. Thank you. Yay! Running consultations on the life and witness of congregation is another one. So, responsibilities of the presbytery. Oversight of ministers. So that's pastoral care, which includes counselling and disciplining ministers, ensuring they have professional supervision, providing opportunities for further training. Now, some of those things the question is how much, at the moment, the synod or the presbytery part of our one synod presbytery looks after that. Do we want to leave things like managing supervision with the synod, or do we want to put it within presbyteries? So, oversight of congregations within the bounds, however that's defined, conducting consultations in the life and witness of the congregation, and receiving and dealing with matters referred to it by the congregation. The wider work of the church, promoting the wider aspects of the work of the church. So presbyteries can set up agencies or organisations that are connected with the Uniting Church. And selection, oversight of candidates, ordination, accreditation and recognition of specified ministries, oversight of lay preachers. As I said, some of those, such as lay preachers, for example, it might be better to leave with the synod body rather than each presbytery having a separate one. Placement and appointment of specified ministries and supervision of vacancies, which of course is in partnership with the Synod Placement Committee. Administration, such administrative functions as may be necessary for the satisfactory working of the presbytery. Providing for persons other than ministers of the words or deacons to preside at the sacraments, so in congregations where there is no minister in placement, approving somebody else to be authorised to celebrate the sacraments, and other things, little things around oversight of ministers and congregations. So if there's a vacancy, it's the role of the PRC along with the congregation to determine supply ministry. Once again, is that something we want to leave to individual presbyteries, or is that better left as a central function? But so they're the list of responsibilities.
So like the proposals that come to Synod, any congregation could bring a proposal to presbytery, say like support for some ban against abortion or something like that, like Guy from Walkerville wants to do.
Oh, sorry, Alan, I can't hear what you're saying.
Okay. Synod has proposals that come to it.
Yep.
So presbytery could also have proposals that come to it.
Yep.
And they would come from the congregation just in the same sense, which would mean you'd have to have some sort of committee to vet them and put them out and all that sort of stuff.
So it would have to be part of the business of the presbytery. Yeah. So and a lot of the things that come to our synod meeting are particularly synod things rather than presbytery things. But yes, congregations are involved in the life of the presbytery. They can bring matters to attention. When I was Secretary of Fluria Presbytery, that was determined to some extent by the chairperson and the secretary, what business would go to the presbytery meeting, also by the standing committee of the presbytery. So yes, there would need to be a leadership group, a standing committee that keeps things running between meetings of the full presbytery. In some of the presbyteries, before we went to the one presbytery, they had a joint group, a standing committee and a PRC joined, which is called Council of the Presbytery, which used to deal with all that business. That would be up to the presbytery to work out what way will work best for it. So, having gone through those responsibilities, having remembered what you said about the distinctive role of this mission network, do you think a multi-presbytery structure can pick up the distinctive elements of your mission network? So turn to each other for a couple of minutes. Or do you think perhaps Linda, yes. There's a lady over here who'd like to say something. I can't quite... No?
I was just answering a question, but I can answer it here.
Oh, okay. Yep, okay. Yeah. So there's sort of a general feeling you're a little uncertain about. Would it be right to say you're uncertain about that? So do you expect there will be ongoing work for the network to do once the presbytery is implemented? And for example, could be, around providing networking opportunities, providing training opportunities, sharing information, encouraging one another.
Yep. I get the sense that a lot of the sort of presbytery-related roles are done by the executive, and what we see in our gatherings is the real guts of what our mission network is on about. And it seems to me that could well continue with the admin presbytery stuff sort of handled at a presbytery level, and the network free to not any longer have to deal with that, but just to focus on what we do best, which is the sort of things people have shared tonight that they love about this network.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Has Synod already made up their mind that we're going to have presbyteries rather than groups?
So the meeting of the Synod and Presbytery, yes, that was the decision last November of the meeting of the Synod and Presbytery, that we are moving to more than one presbytery. Yeah, so that was a decision. And so Synod isn't a body up there of anonymous people. It was actually a meeting of representatives of all the congregations that made that decision. I think I've got the vibe. The vibe of what you're saying here.
It could be 2 or it could be 3 presbyteries.
That's right, yes. But we don't know. No. No, we will not have 7. Okay. I will be, as Rebecca said, I'll be around till the end of the meeting and afterwards if you want to talk with me. If you don't want to stay and talk but you'd like to email me or phone me, my email address is dianebury6@gmail.com. dianebury6. And I have one N in my name, yes. Okay. Yes. Well, my name is in the last newsletter, so it's just dianebury6@gmail.com. Thank you.
And thank you.